All of us students here at Hillsdale study Pericles' funeral oration. Thucydides records his words to the Athenians. The bravest are surely those who have the clearest vision of what is before them, glory and danger alike, and yet notwithstanding go out to meet it. A year ago, American conservatives were in retreat and disarray. The media chanted to Republicans, "You must become remoderates or go extinct." The specter of our new president's post-Christian, post-American world loomed in progressive-dominated Congress, courts, and White House. It seemed like there was no line left for us to hold. A few leaders saw the personal and political dangers of standing fast by principle, yet forged on with vision. As president of the Hillsdale College Republicans, it is my honor to introduce you to one of those leaders, Congressman Mike Pence of Indiana. His uncompromising vision was recognized by the American Conservative Union, who honored him in 2006 with the Courage Under Fire Award. He was named Man of the Year in 2005 by Human Events, standing among previous recipients of these honors, such as Justice Clarence Thomas, Charlton Heston, and Ronald Reagan. He demonstrated his conviction by standing against his own party, opposing the prescription drug benefits expansion of healthcare entitlements. He voted against No Child Left Behind because he believed it undermined local control of education through its federal mandates, something we at Hillsdale ought to know something about. He led the largest caucus in Congress, the House Republican Study Committee, which under his chairmanship grew to 110 members and has consistently given birth to intelligent conservative alternatives to the behemoth state. Last week, on September 12th, he told thousands of Americans standing before the United States Capitol, "There is nothing that ails this government that could not be solved by paying more careful attention to the principles enshrined in the Constitution of the United States." Like the beacon of truth, we shine here at Hillsdale. And now in Washington at the Kirby Center, Congressman Pence continues in the practices of the Constitution and in the principles of the Declaration of Independence that our education has instilled in us. On behalf of the Hillsdale College Republicans and Hillsdale College, we are honored to present. Please welcome the Honorable Congressman Mike Pence.
President and Mrs. Arnn, Mr. John Cervini, Dr. David Bobb, and Elliot, college Republicans, and each and every one of the faculty gathered here today, and all the students here at Hillsdale College who've taken time. Good evening. As I'm sure you know, honor is what allows us to do what is right despite the cost. Even greater honor is required to do what is right in the face of superior power. And the greatest honor is to stand strong, even when it means standing alone. The long fight of Hillsdale College, standing alone, then and now, for the proposition that all men are created equal, then with Frederick Douglass, now with Clarence Thomas, then and now in the conviction that Americans are not horses. We were not born to have saddles on our backs by anyone at any time for any reason. This long fight you at Hillsdale have fought for love of ideas that did not come in dreams, or as Reagan said, did not spring full bloom from your brow, but came from the heart of a great nation. Ideas that rose in a time of unprecedented stress and genius, and since the founding have kept this country whole, prosperous, safe, just, and free. It is therefore a profound honor for me to stand before you in this place, so closely associated with the founding of the Republican Party, in opposition to the unforgivable sin of slavery, this place where statesmanship is taught as an art and where right conduct is seen as its own reward. I thank you, and may God bless you and God bless Hillsdale College. I rise to pay a debt of honor and a debt to history. My subject today is the presidency, and my hope is that you will see that institution in a new light and that you never despair of the republic. The presidency is the most visible thread that runs through the tapestry of the American government. More often than not, for good or for ill, it sets the tone for the other branches and spurs the expectations of the people. Its powers are vast and consequential. Its requirements, from the outset and by definition, impossible for mortals to fulfill without humility and insistent attention to its purpose as set forth in the Constitution of the United States. Isn't it amazing, given the great and momentous nature of the office, that those who seek it seldom pause to consider what they are seeking? Rather, unconstrained by principle or reflection, there seems to be a mad rush towards something that, once its powers are seized, the new president can wield it as an instrument with which to transform the nation and the people according to his highest aspirations. But other than in the crisis of a house divided, the presidency is neither fit nor intended to be such an instrument. When it is made that, the country sustains a wound and cries out justly and indignantly. And what the nation says, and the theme of this address, what it says, informed by its long history, impelled by the laws of nature and nature's God, what it says quite naturally and rightly, if not always gracefully, is that we as a people are not to be ruled and not to be commanded. It says that the president should never forget this, that he has not risen above us, but is merely one of us, chosen by ballot, dismissed after his term, tasked not to transform and work his will upon us, but to bear the weight of decision and to carry out faithfully the design laid in the Constitution and impassioned by the Declaration of Independence. The presidency must adhere to its definition as expressed in the Constitution and to conduct itself to conduct that is defined over time and tradition. While the powers of the office have enlarged with those of the legislature and the judiciary, the framework of the government was actually intended to restrict abuses common to classical empires and the regal states of the 18th century. Without proper adherence to the role contemplated in the Constitution for the presidency, the checks and balances of the constitutional plan become weakened. This has been most obvious in recent years, when the three branches of government have been subject to the tutelage of a single party. Under either party, presidents have often forgotten that they are intended to restrain Congress at times, and that the Congress is independent of their desires. And thus, fused in some unity, the political class has raged forward, an expansion of powers and prerogatives, mistakenly assuming that to exercise power is by default to do good. Even the simplest among us knows that this is not so. Power is an instrument of fatal consequence. It is confined no more readily than quicksilver and escapes good intentions as easily as air flows through mesh. Therefore, those who are entrusted with it must educate themselves in self-restraint A republic, if you can keep it, is about limitation. And for good reason. Because we are mortal and our actions are imperfect. The tragedy of presidential decision is that even with the best choice, some, perhaps many, will be left behind. And some, perhaps many, could die. Because of this truth, the true statesman lives continuously with what Churchill called stress of soul. He may give to Paul, but only because he robs Peter. And that is why you must always be wary of a president who seems to float on his own greatness. For all greatness is tempered by mortality. Every soul is equal. Distinctions among men cannot be owned. They are on loan from God, who takes them back and evens the accounts in the end. It's a tragedy indeed that new generations taking office attribute failures in governance to insufficient power and seek more of it. In the judiciary, this has seldom been better expressed than by Justice Thurgood Marshall's dictum that you do what you think is right and let the law catch up. In the Congress, it presents itself in massive legislation, acts and codes thousands of pages long and so monstrously overcomplicated that no human being can read through them in a lifetime, much less understand them, much less apply them justly to a people that increasingly feel that they are no longer being asked, they are being told. Our nation finds itself in the position of a dog whose duty is not to ask why, because the why is too elevated for his nature, just simply to obey. But America is not a dog and does not require a because I said so jurisprudence to which it is then commanded to catch up, or legislators who knit laws of such insulting complexity that they are heavier than chains, or a president who acts like, speaks like, and is received as a king. The presidency has run off the rails. It begs a new clarity, a new discipline, a new president. The president is not our teacher, our tutor, our guide, or ruler. He does not command us, we command him. We serve neither him nor his vision. It is not his job or his prerogative to redefine custom, law, and beliefs, to appropriate industries, to seize the country, as it were, by the shoulders, so as to impose by force of theatrical charisma his justice on 300 million others. It is neither his job nor his prerogative to shift the power of decision away from the people to the acolytes of his choosing. Is my characterization of unprecedented presumption incorrect? I defer to the judgment of the people, which they will make with their own eyes and ears. Listen to the exact words of the leader of the president's transition team and perhaps his next chief of staff, who said 2 years ago, quote, "It's important that President-elect Obama is prepared to really take power and begin to rule day one." Or more recently, from the words of the latest presidential appointment to avoid confirmation by the Senate, the new head of the Financial Consumer Bureau wrote last Friday, quote, "President Obama understands the importance of leveling the playing field and creating protections that work not just for the wealthy or connected. Take power, rule, leveling. Though it is now, this has never been and should never again be the model of the presidency or the character of an American president. No one can say this too strongly. And no one can say it enough until it is remedied. We are not subjects, we are citizens. We fought a war so that we don't even have to treat kings like kings. And if I may remind you, we won that war. Since then, the principle of royalty has in this country been inoperative. And who is better suited or more required to exemplify this conviction in word and deed than the President of the United States? The powers of the presidency are extraordinary and necessarily great. And great presidents treat them sparingly. For example, it is not the president's job to manipulate the nation's youth for the sake of his agenda or his parties. They are a potent political force when amassed by the social network to which you are incessantly connected. But if the president has their true interests at heart, he will neither flatter them nor let them adore him. For in flattery is condescension, and in adoration is direction. It's hard to say in this room, but youth is neither seasoned nor tested enough to direct a nation. Nor should it the president's business be to presume to direct them. It's difficult enough to do right by your own kids. No one can be the father of all the nation's youth. Is the president therefore expected to turn away from this and other easy advantage? Yes. Like Harry Truman, who went to bed before the result on election night, he must know when to withdraw, to hold back, to forego attention, publicity, and advantage. No finer or more moving or more profound understanding of the nature of the presidency and the command of humility placed upon it has ever been expressed than by President Coolidge. He, like Lincoln, lost a child while he was president, a son of 16. Coolidge wrote, "The day I became president, my son had just started working in a tobacco field. When one of his fellow laborers said to him, 'If my father was president, I would not be working in a tobacco field.' And young Mr. Coolidge replied, 'If my father were your father, you would.'" His admiration for the boy was obvious. While in the White House, President Coolidge's boy contracted blood poisoning from an incident on the south lawn of the White House. And Coolidge wrote these words that a father can understand. What might have happened to him under other circumstances, we do not know. But if I'd not been president. And then he continues. In his suffering, he was asking me to make him well, and I could not. And when he went, the power and glory of the presidency went with him. sensibility such as this, and not power, is the source of presidential dignity and must be restored. It depends entirely upon character, self-discipline, and an understanding of the fundamental principles that underlie not only the republic, but life itself. It communicates that the president feels the gravity of his office and is willing to sacrifice himself. His eye is not upon his own prospects, but on the storm of history through which it is his responsibility to navigate with the specific powers accorded to him and limitations placed upon them, not merely by man in his design, but by God in his. The modern presidency has drifted far from the great strength and illumination of its source. The Constitution has given life by the passionate Declaration of Independence. The Constitution, terse, sober, and specific, does not, except by implication, address the president's demeanor, but this we can read in the best qualities of the founding generation, which we would do well to imitate. In the Capitol Rotunda are heroic paintings. One of the signing of the Declaration of Independence, another of the victory at Saratoga, another of the victory at Yorktown. And something seldom seen in history. There is a painting of a general, the leader of an armed rebellion, resigning his commission and turning his army over to a democratically elected government. Upon hearing from Benjamin West that George Washington, having won the war and been urged to use the army to make himself king, would instead return to his farm, George III said, "If he does that, he will be the greatest man in the world." He did, and he was. To aspire to such virtue and self-restraint would, in a sense, be difficult. But in another sense, it should be easy. Difficult because it would be demanding and ideal. And easy because it's the right thing to do. And the rewards are immediate and self-evident. A president who slights the Constitution is like a rider who hates his horse. He will be thrown. And the nation along with him. The president solemnly swears to preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution. He does not solemnly swear to ignore, overlook, supplement, or reinterpret it. Other than in a crisis of morality, decency, or existence, like the Civil War. If the president should want to hurry along the Constitution to fit his own notions or designs, he should do so by amendment rather than adjustment. For if he joins the powers of his office to his own willful interpretation, he steps away from a government of laws and toward a government of men. Is the Constitution a fluctuating and inconstant document, a collection of suggestions, the purpose of which is to stimulate debate in a future to which the founders were necessarily blind? Progressives tell us that even the framers themselves could not reach agreement in its regard. But they did. They did agree upon it. And they wrote it down. And they signed it. And they lived by it. Its words are unchanging and unchangeable except as planned by careful amendment. There is no instruction to the President to override the law and, like Justice Marshall, to let it catch up to his superior conception. Why is this good? Well, it's good because the sun will burn out, the Ohio River will flow backwards, and a cow will jump over the moon 10,000 times before any modern president's conception is superior to that of the founders of this nation. Would it be such a great surprise that a good part of the political strife of our times is because one president after another, rather than keeping faith to it, argues with the document he is supposed to live by? This discontent will only be calmed by returning the presidency to the great first principles. The president should regard the Constitution and the Declaration like an obsessed lover. They should be on his mind all the time. The prism through which the light of all questions of governance passes. Though we have, sometimes gradually, sometimes radically, moved away from this, we can move back to it. And who better than the president to restore this wholesome devotion? And as the president returns to the consistent application of the principles of the Constitution, he will also, by doing so, ensure fiscal responsibility and prosperity. Who is better suited with his executive and veto powers to carry over the duty of self-restraint to the idea of fiscal solvency than the President of the United States? When the President restrains government spending, leaving room for the American people to enjoy the fruits of their labor, growth is inevitable. As Senator Robert Taft wrote, "Liberty has been the key to our progress in the past and is the key to our progress in the future. If we can preserve liberty in all its essentials, there is no limit to the future of the American people." Now, whereas at home the president must be cautious, dutiful, deferential, abroad his character must change. Were he to ask for a primer on how to act in relation to other states, which no holder of the office has needed to this point, and were that primer to be written by the American people in either 1776 or 2010, you can be confident it would contain the following instructions. You do not bow to kings. The President of the United States of America bows to no man. When in foreign lands, you do not criticize your own country. You do not argue the case against the United States, but rather the case for it. You do not apologize to the enemies of the United States of America. And should you be confused, a country, a people, a region that harbors, shelters, supports, or cheers attacks upon our country are enemies of the United States. And to repeat, you do not apologize to them. Closely related to this, and perhaps the least ambiguous of the President's complex responsibilities, is his duty as Commander-in-Chief of our military. In this regard, there is a very simple rule, unknown to some presidents, regardless of party. If, and it's perhaps the biggest if any president can face, for it will follow not just him, but hundreds of thousands or millions of others, not just for the rest of their lives, but in cost of blood and souls beyond life itself. If, and it's an if that requires long and deep thought, tremendously hard labor at determining the truth of things, a lifetime of education, the mind of a general, the wisdom of a statesman, the heart of an infantryman. If, after careful determination, intense stress of soul, and the deepest prayer, if then you go to war, then having gone to war, by God, you go to war to win. You do not cast away American lives or those of the innocent non-combatant enemy upon a theory, a gambit, or a notion. And if the politics of your own election or your party intrude on your decision for even an instant, there are no words for this. More commonplace, but hardly less important, are other expectations of the President in this regard. He must not stint on the equipment and the provisioning of our armed forces. And if he errs, it must not be on the side of scarcity, but on the side of surplus. He must be the guardian of his troops, taking every step to avoid the loss of even a single American life. The American soldier is as precious as the closest of your kin, because he is your kin. And for his sake, the President must, in effect, say to the Congress and to the people, I am Commander-in-Chief. It is my sacred duty to defend the United States. And so I demand that you give our soldiers everything they need to complete the mission and come home safe. Of all the hard choices that Congress may have to make to achieve that end, which one of these things alone or in combination is more terrible than the sacrifice of our children or the defeat of our nation. If in fulfilling this duty the President wavers, he will have betrayed his office. For this is not a policy, it is probity. And it is not an expedient artifact of my imagination. It is written on the blood-soaked ground of Saratoga, Yorktown, Antietam, Cold Harbor, Guadalcanal, the Pointe du Hoc, the Chosin Reservoir, Iraq, and Afghanistan, and 1,000 other places in our history in lessons repeated over and over again. The presidency, a great and complex subject upon which I have only touched, has become symbolic of overreaching. There are many truths that we've been frightened to tell or face. If we run from them, they will catch us with our backs turned and pull us down. Better that we should not flee, but rather stop and look them in the eye. What might our forebears say to us, knowing what they knew, having done what they did? I have no doubt. They would tell us to channel our passions, speak the truth, and do what's right, slowly and with resolution, to work calmly, steadily, and without animus or fear, to be like a rock in the tide. Let the water tumble about us and be firm and unashamed in our love of country. And so we are. I see us like those in Philadelphia in 1776. Danger all around. But a fresh chapter, ready to begin, uncorrupted, with great possibilities, and inexplicably, perhaps miraculously, the way clearing ahead. I have never doubted that providence can appear in history, like the sun emerging from behind the clouds, if only as a reward for adherence to first principles. As Churchill said, he must indeed have a blind soul who cannot see that some great purpose and design is being worked out here below, of which we have the honor to be faithful servants. A long time ago, during the tortured history of Rome in the 4th century AD, the Emperor Constantius, son of the Emperor Constantine, was faced with an ultimatum backed by what appeared to be a military force impossible to resist. Failure and defeat seemed certain. But in the morning, when his answer was due, he said to his assembled troops, "Last night, after I retired to rest, the shade of the great Constantine rose before my eyes, and his well-known voice forbade me to despair of the Republic." We too have the voices of shades who emerge from the past. We too have what Lincoln in his first inaugural called the mystic cords of memory stretching from every patriot grave. They bind us to the great and the humble, the known and the unknown. And if I hear them clearly, what they say is that although we may have strayed, we have not strayed too far to return. For we are, every one of us, their descendants. The sinews are still there, lively, waiting to flex. We can still astound the world with justice, reason, and strength. I know this is true. But even if it were not, we could not in decency stand down, if only for our debt to history. The debt we owe to those who came before, who did great things, who suffered more than we suffer, who gave more than we give, and pledged their lives, their fortunes, and their sacred honor for us whom they did not know. For as the old book says, we drink from wells we did not dig, and are warmed by fires we did not build. And so we must remember and pay our debt to history. Many generations are gone, but I see them in my mind's eye. And by the character and memory of their existence, they forbid us to despair of the Republic. I see them crossing the prairies in the sun and wind. I see their faces looking out from steel mills and coal mines, and immigrant ships crawling into the harbors at dawn. I see them at war, at work, and at peace. I see them long departed, looking into the camera with hopeful and sad eyes. I see them embracing their children, who became us. They are our family and our blood. We cannot desert them. In spirit, all of them come down to all of us, in a connection that out of love cannot betray. They are silent now and forever, but from the eternal silence of every patriot grave, there is yet an echo that says, it's not too late. Keep faith with us. Keep faith with God. And do not ever despair of the Republic. Thank you, and God bless you.